Recently, I've been thinking about the abortion debate, something that had been largely settled here in England and Wales, or so I thought.
This is just a very clear issue to me. This is something that's as clear as slavery. I believe we need to abolish.
Everybody talks about human rights, but the baby, they don't have a voice.
I thought there might even have been police here. I thought, oh goodness me, are we going to be seen as enemies of the state almost?
Now, a new generation of vocal campaigners in the UK have been energised by organisations in the US.
God doesn't create rubbish. I believe that every human being is created in the image and likeness of God, willed by Him, loved by Him. And as such, I believe that we should have respect for every single human life from the moment of conception.
Spurred on by their success in campaigning for restrictions on abortions.
Where was the shame from knowing that I'd killed my children?
Nearly 3 years on from the ruling reversing Roe versus Wade, a landmark case that once made abortion legal, it's become even more political.
I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs.
Let's go into Parliament and let's go and change the law.
And now a big change in the law on UK abortions may also be on the way.
I think that American and British and European anti-abortion campaigners have got their act together, and frankly, women's bodies are being used as the battlefield for the culture wars.
So I'm wondering whether it's time to take the temperature again on one of the world's most divisive issues. We've done some research here at Sky News because abortion is still illegal in England and Wales under Victorian laws. It's only allowed in certain circumstances up to 24 weeks. But that may be changing. MPs are currently voting on that in Parliament. So we've been doing some polling and we've been asking people what they think about this issue. Now, overwhelmingly 55% of people think that abortion should be decriminalised, but 22% of people think that women should face some criminal prosecution for having an abortion. Now that's slightly higher number than I would have expected. So I'm going to go meet some people who are anti-abortion. They call themselves pro-lifers, and they've been energised since Donald Trump's inauguration and the campaign in the US.
One of the greatest tragedies in our nation's history. The anniversary of the implementation of the Abortion Act in 1968.
All my sins I now detest them, never will I sin again.
As the law could be about to change, these protesters are mourning the original Abortion Act, which allows the procedure but can still criminalise women for their own abortions.
You hear the term abortion, 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 but actually seeing videos, seeing the process, it's traumatising.
Many women believe that feminism has liberated them in lots of ways, but if the end result is to liberate you from motherhood to the extent of millions and millions of babies terminated, that doesn't strike me as a liberated society.
I feel a bit persecuted that even though people stand outside and pray, they're not doing anything else, they're not shouting at the people going to the clinic, that it's become, as Father Goff said, you can get arrested.
They're also protesting safe access zones, which are put in place to stop harassment, alarm or distress to anyone within 150 metres of abortion clinics. But some anti-abortion campaigners like Isabel have got caught up in the new rules.
We recognise God's part. So the abortion clinic is about just over 150 metres. So if we're standing here, we're still outside the buffer zone. So maybe it might be helpful to me to just say that. So this is the notice which shows you about the PSPO. Oh, yeah. So that's the local buffer zone that came in that I was taken to court over.
Right.
So that's not showing you where it stops or starts. It's just telling you a bit about it. Just to say, even me talking about it now, I'm having to be careful because we're in a buffer zone.
Understood.
So I think we would have to be very, very careful about what we talk about in a buffer zone. Yeah.
Should we go head back then?
Yeah.
She's a lifelong anti-abortion activist, handing leaflets outside clinics for 20 years.
I pray there, but I've also in the past offered help and alternatives to women considering abortion.
And how does it feel when you sort of change someone's mind?
It's it's been a really, really incredible experience, to be honest. I'm very blessed. I've got to kind of hold some of these children. I've got to kind of know these families, and it's so impactful. And just when that happens once, it really makes you think, this is worth it. Even if it was only one life that was spared.
She now goes there to silently pray, but in 2022 was arrested outside an abortion clinic, something that was later overturned.
They actually asked me what I was doing, and I said, well, I'm just physically standing here. I might be praying in my head, but nothing out loud. And on that basis, that they made an arrest. I hadn't even said that I was praying at that stage, or simply I might be in my head. So I was heavily searched. I was taken to the police station, locked in a police cell for hours before being questioned under caution. And then eventually I went to court.
Why do you think it's important to pray there?
I believe that abortion centres are like the modern day Calvary. This is where innocents are being put to death. I might not be physically, interacting with anybody or, stopping anyone or talking to anyone. Just to be there in prayer is really, really important from a spiritual perspective.
I guess people on the other side of the debate think that women should have a right to choose.
We always believe that anybody, male or female, have restrictions on what they can or can't choose to do. Our society doesn't permit us to do anything that we want to do. And I believe when our rights or our abilities affect other people, then there needs to be limits on that. So even with my own body, there has to be limits if it's affecting other people.
I guess what do you say to people who may look at this and say, you used to go there to try and change people's minds, you got huge satisfaction and gratification when women did, and now you are saying it's just about silent prayer?
So firstly, I would say I was never going there trying to change people's minds. I was going there offering them help and support and praying. And like I say, there's many women I met there.
But you did have an effect. Women did change their minds, women did have babies.
There was women who didn't want to have an abortion to start with, who then felt able to do what they wanted to do, which was keep their baby.
Because of you?
Yes, because of the help that we offered, yeah. So that was them changing their own mind. I would like every woman to choose life for her child.
Before the safe access zones came in, we would have protesters literally here, like on the doorstep, that were harassing women as they came through, harassing their partners, harassing staff that work here, handing out leaflets that had information that was unsafe and not true.
To try and stop them.
To try and stop them from having an abortion. They would be singing, they would be praying. Often it was quite disruptive, and there could be aggression, but sometimes it was completely silent, but like silent prayer and things like that. But either way, it just wasn't what women or people working here needed.
I know this law won't sort of substantively change abortion time limits or the grounds for abortion, but it would remove any possibility of investigating or prosecuting women for an abortion. How would that change?
The law itself works very well for the majority of people, but for those individuals, like we've said, in those kind of really high-risk domestic abuse situations where, you know, their partner monitors their movements or their communication and their devices, and so they have such significant barriers to accessing healthcare in general, but abortion care in particular, that they maybe can't make it to a clinic. They might seek abortion care from those kind of unregulated providers. So this amendment would take away that decriminalisation of women themselves, and it's a really strange part of the law that we have.
And can you think of any other medical procedure where the police can ask for this kind of personal sensitive information?
No.
And why do you think they can?
Because I think women's bodies are consistently under scrutiny and under discussion, and I think particularly in recent years with the Roe v. Wade overturning and Donald Trump, you know, winning the election again, I think it's really pushed forward the anti-choice rhetoric that has always been there, but it's absolutely ramping up.
We could be about to see a significant change to abortion laws, not in terms of time limits or the grounds for the reasons why people might have an abortion, but on who can be prosecuted. And this would be a seismic shift.
So there's no other healthcare provision that we see with a criminal foundation in this way, and it has a very real practical consequence because we've seen some incredibly vulnerable women and girls who didn't even know that they were pregnant, who have late-term miscarriages, finding themselves with police officers rather than counsellors at their hospital beds, finding themselves under suspicion for months, if not years. And I just don't think that's where the British public are at.
Well, in terms of public debate, do you think that is shifting?
I very much worry that there are people signalling to their fellow travellers in America that if they were to fund their political campaigns or work with them, they could influence abortion access in this country. And I think anybody who is complacent that the British public is broadly supportive of abortion access doesn't understand what's been happening in our political debates and the Trump playbook that is coming our way.
Yeah.
Rachel runs sessions at the UK arm of Rachel's Vineyard, a faith-based organisation originally founded in America, dedicated to, in their words, healing the trauma of abortion, and frames it not as a medical procedure, but as a harm to mothers and fathers.
I had abortions because I didn't want to be a mum. I had this problem. I just didn't want to be a mum. I didn't think I was equipped enough. I didn't think I had enough in my life going on. And I thought this would solve the problem. If I have an abortion, that will solve the problem. And in the beginning, it felt nothing but relief when I first did it. And then the second time again, felt relief. But within that relief, I very quickly began to realise that not something had left my life, but someone had died for the abortions. And I carried an awful amount of grief, an awful amount of shame that went along with that, and a huge dollop of denial as well. I went on retreat, 18 years ago, changed my life. And I think with all sudden deaths, whether you are 80 years of age or you're 26 weeks born, out of the womb, and you've sadly died, we need to be able to investigate that.
Do you find it uncomfortable that many of the women who are vulnerable at the time, vulnerable women that you've seen, that you help after they've had abortion, might be investigated by the police? Do you think that's...
So I actually think that the training from the police needs to be increased so we meet these women so sensitively. That is so important.
But they'll still be under an investigation.
They'll be under an investigation, but there's flexibility within the law already. But for us to have compassion and to have mercy, we have to have justice. You can't have the two without the other. You're all right.
When women are deciding whether to have an abortion, that doctor has to, as much as they can, be neutral about the situation. But when women go to your Rachel's Vineyard, they know very much where you are.
They don't actually. They don't, because I think we can very, very easily split my pro-life activism away from Rachel's Vineyard. It's not a place for a political voice.
Let's go into Parliament and let's go and change the law.
The battle being fought in Westminster right now, campaigners have already seen off in Northern Ireland. And in 2019, abortion was fully decriminalised. So I crossed the sea to see how it's working over there.
So a number of our activists had their houses and studios raided by police. They had laptops confiscated. The police were always present in terms of knowing they were definitely watching us and knowing that they knew that we were up to. For a long time, I was getting the pills delivered to then send out to people or hand delivered to people. And after a while, after a couple of arrests, my address never was able to receive them after that. So there was a definite sense of being surveilled and being watched. So it's a huge relief that that didn't happen anymore.
So that's completely changed now?
It's completely changed, yeah.
Hi. Hiya, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Orla had a medical abortion on the edge of the time limit at 23 weeks. She suffered a premature rupture of membranes, went into labour, and was then told she would likely develop sepsis.
That's me and her, yes. And then, yeah, you just get little keepsakes, really. So this was the first wee cardigan then that when they brought us to her that she had on.
She wore them?
She wore them, yeah. And then
They're tiny.
They're so tiny, aren't they?
Though abortion was legal and it had been 2 years since decriminalisation, she said she had to fight to get the care she needed.
Anxiety is not even a right word for it. It was like nothing I've ever experienced before, that tension in your whole body and fear that this one opportunity you have right now to survive that's down to a matter of hours. I would have died and my daughter was dying. I could feel her dying. And it was a compassionate choice. When we got the postmortem after, the infection had went into her wee body too, and she had nuclear debris in her lungs. If she had have survived at all, it would have been a very, very painful existence. So yes, I had to break through the stigma that had been ingrained in me in Northern Ireland. I had to break through the legal fight and the barriers that were being put in place in me. But I was strong enough to know that that was compassionate and that healthcare was needed both for me and her.
Despite the country being majority pro-choice, I think with everything going on in the US right now, it was inevitable that this debate will be back in the fore and with this amendment in the Commons. But I think I've been surprised about how motivated the pro-life voice is in the UK because of Donald Trump. And then here in Northern Ireland, how long that stigma around abortion lasts even after decriminalisation. It's made me not that hopeful that this issue will never stop being a divisive one.
The UK is majority pro-choice, and our polling shows majority for decriminalising abortion. But these new activists who are against abortion are energised. And as Parliament pulls in one direction, they'll only get louder and more effective at getting their message across.